Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, asking you, as I often forget to do, to please go to iTunes, provide us with a fabulous 5-star review as a way of exposing the podcast to other listeners who have not discovered it yet. And if you are a YouTube watcher, please like and subscribe. Also, join our very active, slightly psychotic commenters who have a lot of fun talking interesting and then sometimes nonsense, and it's pretty nuts and sort of fun to watch as you're watching. But like and subscribe. Please give us a 5-star review, and you can say nice things about my panelists here. Executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
I just want to remind people that, as we said on Friday, Abe does laugh. So that's a good thing to bring up in your 5-star review. The man of one-liners, senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Let's also note the one-liner Seth Mandel. And our Hildy Johnson from His Girl Friday, the cynical, hard-bitten newswoman of old standing, though young and dynamic, like Rosalind Russell. We have, of course, Washington Free Beacon editor Eliana Johnson. Hi, Eliana.
Hi, John.
I hope you appreciate, if you have not seen His Girl Friday, the greatest newspaper movie ever made and one of the great screwball comedies ever made, the romantic comedy, Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell running a newspaper on the evening of an execution in Cook County. Unbelievable, greatest movie ever, and calling any female news person a Hildy Johnson is a huge compliment. So everybody wants to be Hildy Johnson if you are in the news business. I believe Maggie Haberman has modeled the way she talks, the way she speaks, everything on Rosalind Russell's Hildy Johnson, just to give you one example. Okay, moving on from my senility into actual issues. Clearly, there is an enormous political shift going on here in the United States in relation to the subject of the data center, which is, of course, the energy-producing physical plants that are being built to help provide appropriate energy to power AI in the United States and indeed across the world. Ordinarily, you would think that this would be a bonanza for the states, the communities, and everybody where data centers are going to be situated, because they provide employment. They are construction heavy, and so heavy industry tradesmen, and then of course the people who can be employed running them. And so this is one of the offshoots of AI that would seem to suggest that there is a future for American manufacturing, at least in the support structure for AI that is going to be necessary to make it go. But we have now all these indications indicating that not only doesn't the public like it, but that politicians are very, very aware that the public is turning on data centers, because one of the states in which the data centers are the most there are the most of, and that was welcoming them with open arms, suddenly started getting a little utsy, and that's Texas, and that's Greg Abbott. And it turns out that Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is in a little bit of a race, in his governor's race. Like this is not a runaway. He's not in a runaway race in November. A lot of stuff going on in these races. And Mike Rogers, of course, running for Senate in Michigan as the Republican against Abdullah said, calling for a moratorium on data centers rather than going with the economic growth argument that you would expect a Republican to go with, in the idea that there is an entirely new industry being built and we want to welcome them to our state so that they will spend their money here, build things, and have us as a leader in this next generation of the industrial revolution. So, Abe, you wrote a really wonderful newsletter on this last Friday. Give us some sense of your feeling about what on earth is going on here with what is an obvious response to obvious polling across parties that says that these data centers are unpopular and that your wise political move is to stand some distance from them.
Yeah, and thanks for the kind words about the newsletter. I don't think that the individual arguments that we often hear against the construction of data centers actually hold much water. That wasn't a pun, because one of the arguments is about cutting off the local water supply to others, particularly around farmland. That's one, or noise pollution, or energy prices, local energy prices going up, polluting the soil is another. If you look into all these individually, there's really not much there. What I think is happening is that people generally, especially in small towns, resent big tech, resent AI, resent the speed with which the technology and potentially these hulking data centers have been foisted on them and into their lives. And they don't forget the potential. I mean, we read about this one place or another every day, the potential for mass unemployment. I'm not endorsing that theory, but because that's out there, that AI could be this mass scale job killer. So to me, people are looking at data centers as this giant symbol of every big tech mixed with the state, because Silicon Valley and the government have been working hand in glove for a very long time now, but particularly when it comes to this issue, and they don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want it in their backyard. They just don't want to see it. It's sort of like there's something fundamental about it that has nothing to do with making a rational or logical argument.
I think that's right. This is a NIMBY, not in my backyard movement. And look, I don't fault politicians for making calculations that they think they need to make to win elections. After all, that's their job. Okay, Greg Abbott's job is to win in November. Mike Rogers' job is to win in November. But I think they're wrong. I think they're just wrong on the merits. And I think partly this is the fault of the tech companies and their failure to anticipate the backlash and the level to which people distrust and revile them for various reasons on both the right and the left. On the right, there's a distrust because of what happened in 2020, the Twitter ban of the Biden laptop. And on the left, there's a distrust because there's a confluence of foreign funding from China and Iran and Russia that is knit in with the socialist movement that is underwriting and behind all of these petitions to ban data centers, about 75 of which have been successful. And I think they have failed to make a positive case for why these are good. There was an incredible New York Times and Wall Street Journal story on the teacher bonuses, $51,000 teacher bonuses that folks got in Richland Parish, Louisiana. This was a June 23rd story in the New York Times because of the sales tax that was brought to this county because of the data centers, and also just from the benefits of AI, I think particularly in the realm of medicine. And I feel like they need an ad campaign. And actually, I think Trump, for all his poor messaging, has been quite good on this. His message on this was, if I were the mayor of a small town, I would want a data center. 2, they have a big PR problem. And 3, we can't lose the tech war to China. I mean, these things are going to get built. The question is just whether we're going to build them and they're going to be in America or whether they're going to be in China.
Right. And don't forget the free tacos, by the way.
Where-
OpenAI is holding open houses with communities and offering free tacos. So if you
is that like Trump holding the
Yeah.
taco bowl on Cinco de
so if
Mayo?
you're worried about AI, have you considered reconsidering it over a taco? I think, I mean, honestly, I think Eliana's dead on. I think, first of all, the not in my backyard thing, it should be, we could draw this out because essentially, and what Eliana's saying is that the effects are global of the AI arms race, if we want to call it that, but the impacts are local. So the fights over water don't always like the amount of water that a data center uses. They use it for cooling, right? So a lot of it evaporates, at least the process they use now, and that uses up water. It can't be reused. So in places where there's a water problem, that's a problem. In places where water isn't a problem, that's not a problem. Nationally, they're not using a ton of water. That may change because if there's a stampede to build these systems, and that is a legitimate concern, if this is a wave of data centers being built, that number will go up. But as of now, they're not drinking America's, I drink, it's not an I drink your milkshake situation here where OpenAI is putting a straw in the ground and drinking other people's water. It depends where it is. It also depends where it is with electricity. In some places, there's plenty of water and there's not plenty of, and the electric grid is stressed. So in those places, use the water for cooling instead of the electricity. Where where the situation is the reverse, use giant air conditioners and use electricity instead. It's very hard to say, here's what you should do with data centers, is what I'm saying in terms of environmental impacts and all that, because it really does matter where you're talking about. There's no one national one size fits all, but nationally, this is clearly becoming a problem because in Texas and Michigan, Republicans are running from data centers. So, we have this national versus local problem here where, Mike Rogers, who's trying to walk a tightrope in Michigan by talking about maybe moratoria instead of banning them or something like that, he can't come up with a solution. Neither can Greg Abbott, because your solution depends on what your local resources are, and that makes this really complicated. However, I do think that Eliana is also right in the way that AI sort of burst on the scene and was like, we're going to make it so nobody has to work anymore. And that scared the heck out of people. And they have their messaging is, this is like Mark Zuckerberg when he went in front of Congress and people made fun of the fact that he was clearly studying what a humanoid would sound like in testifying in front of Congress, right? It was like Mark Zuckerberg learning to be human. This is Silicon Valley. Like, I don't really know how else to say it, but Silicon Valley doesn't have social skills. They don't.
Okay,
This is a serious point that I'm making here. I'm not making fun of them. It's an industry that doesn't get social cues.
But it did. See, so I think that there is a generational story here that analogically does prove that we are going through the third or the fourth industrial revolution, depending on how you count it, because these kinds of reactions, these kinds of large-scale social revolts against technological change have been a feature of massive industrial technological shifts from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to the present. And the fact that we're going through one now is almost a demonstration that we are all correct in believing that something entirely transformative is going on here, and that the world of 2060 is going to be a very different place from the world of 2026. What that will be, who will be in front, who will be which will be the most powerful country, which will be the technological leader, what states will profit, what states will collapse. You would never have thought at the beginning of the 20th century that New York State would become an also-ran industrial force at the beginning of the 21st century. New York State was the technological powerhouse of the United States in the 19th century up to the early 20th century. And then its lunch got eaten because it was part of an older technological revolution and did not partake of the new, of the airplane age and whatever you want to call it. Here we are, and in the beginning, in the 90s and the early 2000s, Silicon Valley and the world of the entrepreneurial techpreneur was as lionized and romanticized and treated in godlike fashion by journalists and others as anything that I have ever witnessed. An entire line of publications was created to service the idea that we were now being led into a new dawn by this incredible, young, vibrant industry that was value neutral, that could empower anyone, that was bringing things free that used to cost, that was providing information that used to be only in the hands of a very few people. Mark Zuckerberg was not a controversial figure until, in the early going of the first years of Facebook, until I think the movie The Social Network came out and kind of threw him into relief because there was a lawsuit about it. But the world of Silicon Valley people, they were heroes. Bezos was a hero. Steve Jobs was a hero. Steve Jobs was a sort of mythic figure in the United States almost. And Steve Jobs was a thief. The guy stole people's programs, stole David Galerter's, the entire structure of, the Apple interface was stolen from David Galerter's startup, the Time Machine system. And, he just up and stole it. That's what he was like. He was a sociopath, but he was like this figure in the future. Bill Gates also, and then he's going to cure malaria and all of that. Things started to get hairy. People started to get worried about the rise of social media, what it was doing to their kids and all that. And then 2016 hit, and the convenient explanation provided to liberal culture that Trump rose and won due to nefarious subterfuge and manipulation of tech and through Cambridge Analytica's magical power over Facebook to change people's opinions, flipped this all around. And we are now 10 years into a world in which these people, once gods who walked among us, are now largely villains. They have replaced drug companies as the kind of ultra bad guys, or tobacco company executives or something like that. And then you add Elon Musk's blunderbuss behavior last year as the head of Doge, and his own bizarre behavior running Twitter and the way he tweets and the way he talks about people and all of that. And you have this recipe for, okay, here's the new thing. It's AI. It's all happening so fast. It's happening faster than they understand it. And the only thing that it really needs are these buildings that have to help make it go. And this is the one moment at which the people of America, not stockholders, not hedge funds who buy stock, not venture capitalists, but ordinary people are being put in a position where they can go, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on a minute. Nobody gave us a vote about how our entire lives are being transformed around us. Now, I'm with Eliana. I think they're wrong. I think Luddism is wrong. I think resisting technological change only ends up harming you because it means that you fall behind others who take greater advantage of it, and you therefore end up in, a state of disadvantage in an international competition. But you can see why it's the first time the public has been in any position to express an opinion about whether or not our lives should be taken over by the AI revolution.
I think that's a great way to frame it. And I want to say that the case in the public mind is even stronger. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I mean this impressionistic case about, as John says, the villains can be made even stronger, because it's not just that Silicon Valley, the new titans of Silicon Valley, don't have social skills. They have some very unsettling ideas about what humanity is and means, and they are not shy about expressing them. They go around talking about uploading consciousness and having
Living forever.
living forever, and having AI sort of take from us a bunch of sort of human cognitive tasks. We spent. I assume everyone here has seen these clips of these robot races for the past week. This is all. I mean, it's sci-fi, but very creepy. And part of their PR problem is that, to some extent, they stoke fears of AI to create hype around AI. They stoke fears of AI as a way of saying, we have no idea how much this is going to be able to do.
And to get investors.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Right. So penny wise, pound foolish, or, like multi-billion wise, generationally or civilizationally foolish, because the very claims that they are making are the very claims that will cause the public to say, I got a pitchfork, I got a torch, I'm coming after you, and I'm going to burn down your data center because you are going to ruin everything. And I think the point that, Abe, you make about the kind of transhumanist ethos philosophy stuff, which probably most people don't really know about that much. They're not sort of following it. But this idea of a kind of godlike, personless, bodiless, formless knowledge that can outdo us all has been a terror for human beings since the beginning of civilization. It is the story of the Tower of Babel. That is what the story of the Tower of Babel was. God needed to make sure that the people could not all speak the same language. They needed to be broken up into massive numbers of tribes that could not understand each other, so that they could not gather together to overthrow the natural order. So if that's a myth, want to call the Tower of Babel a myth, you can say that just shows that this is a deep human wellspring of fear about.
One can get very mystical about this, because the original AI breakthrough with Google had to do with its ability to translate language in a way that no other computer program had ever been able to do. It sort of made this leap in understanding any language at once, without having to go through some intermediary steps. So the Tower of Babel idea is very resonant here. But I want to say, John, when you say that most people don't know that, Sam Altman or whomever else is out there talking about transhumanism, I think that's true, but we're at a place where I think most Americans can feel it a little bit.
Yeah, the way it comes through is just AI's coming for your job. You're going to be displaced and you're not going to matter.
There's that, but there's also, we all deal with bots now, or something like that in our lives. If when you call for customer service, sometimes on the phone, they'll say, I'm a artificial, whatever the language they use, I'm an enhanced, program, so you can talk to me in full sentences, and and things like that. And
the radio, if you listen to the radio, which I don't know how many people still listen to terrestrial radio, but every right, but every every iHeartRadio
station,
ad is promo. That's the word I'm looking for. Every iHeartRadio promo is guaranteed human. The human is picking your music.
Right. That's right.
It says that at every 5 minutes you will hear at least here, locally, and I have no reason to assume that iHeartRadio nationally isn't doing that with every single station that subscribes. Every 5 minutes, you'll hear the radio station come on. By the way, it will not be a human telling you this. Right. It will be the sound of a machine. It's an ad created for, but you will, every 5 minutes, you will hear them say guaranteed human.
Yeah. So
it's important to keep in mind that whatever anxieties exist in the American public, to whatever level they exist, our foreign adversaries are seizing on them and amplifying them. And the left and the mainstream media comes in and says, no, those anxieties are American. You can't blame them on the Chinese. And sure, it's true that there are real anxieties, but that is what our foreign adversaries do. They come in and stoke divisions and amplify them and turn up the volume on them. And whatever debate we have in this country should be between Americans on the terms of Americans, and we should have a real debate. And it's very hard to disentangle these things. And so I think it's just important to remain aware, because in foreign media, all the press there is about the water usage, the electricity usage, the vibration, the noise. It's all the same things that we hear in the American press about these things.
Yeah, and also this is why I think, by the way, that Abe's original, theory is right, is because instinctively, when you read polls, the polls say, here's the Gallup poll. What are you worried about with data centers? 50% mention effects on resources. Excess water usage is the top. Energy consumption is tied with it. Environmental impact. And then in parentheses, it says non-specific. So to me, what's happening is people are regurgitating this the way Eliana says that our enemies are. The public is internalizing the terminology of the environmental opposition and things like that. But I think they're doing it in a way that's clear to me they're not sure they believe it, right? I think you can see this like dual thing happening here, where it's like, in their brains, they're thinking what Abe is saying. They have these fears that they can't even always necessarily spell out about AI, and that these fears are much bigger than local water usage. It's just very clear to me watching them that these fears are bigger than water usage, and that people are not, saying, well, why don't you use a closed loop system? Because then AI, the Sam Altman will say, well, we're going to transition to a closed loop water system where we're going to reuse instead of evaporate the water. It's not making people feel better. Why? Because Abe's right, which is that this is everything that's happening here is going on a deeper level. And when they have to express their opposition to it, they are using the terminology of the narrative that has been presented to them. And that is having the effect that Eliana says, which is that it gets echoed and blasted out by enemy propaganda who are trying to leap ahead of us in this race. China loves the fact that people are saying they're worried about water sources, because in China, it doesn't matter whether you're worried about the environment. Have you seen the air quality in Beijing, right? So all these things are sort of playing into not just the fact that we're not having what I think is an honest conversation about our fears here. Not that this just should be nationalized group therapy, but the fact that we're not actually, the public is speaking in these sort of keywords is a weird mirror image of AI itself, where the public is like an AI response to why they hate AI, because it's coming through their computers and they're reading it off their screen. But the whole thing goes off the rail if you can't actually have a conversation on what specifically are you afraid of and why. And that sort of thing is really, again, it goes back on the companies that are leading, John, as you call it, industrial revolution. It's incumbent on them to sell the revolution.
In the history of these revolutions, the founders, the creators, the innovators are terrible at selling their creations and their innovations, in part because the disruption comes before the philosophical explanation of why the disruption is going to be good for everybody. The disruption just happens, right? The depopulation of the British countryside, the creation of the industrial worker class at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, happened so fast that the people who owned the factories, they didn't know that, something new was happening. They just knew that they had orders for things. They needed workers. They recruited them. The workers came to the factories and they drove them practically to death simply to keep the lines running to make the goods. And then as time went on, over 2 generations, I mean, I just looked this up as we were talking, it was not until sort of like 1833 that the British passed a law saying that children under the age of 9 could not work in textile factories. Until 1833, a 6-year-old could work in a textile factory, which was an incredibly dangerous place. Like, not just because they were children and all that, but also like physically very dangerous. Like there were, machines, accidents, all sorts of stuff like that. First like regulations involving safety of machines, that all starts in like the 1840s. We're talking half a century into the Industrial Revolution. Was there an industrialist who wrote a brilliant paper explaining that what we were heading toward was this great democratization, raising incomes, the creation of a middle class? They didn't know what they were doing. They just knew that this was happening. Now, all these people who do this at least have a patina of like education and respectability. So they throw a lot of crap onto the pile to try to make themselves feel better. And, I was thinking about Sam Bankman-Fried. You were talking about Sam Altman. So Sam Bankman-Fried, of course, in jail for his, handling of whatever the hell it was that he did, and how his whole shtick, really like a great supervillain, was what he was actually doing was effective altruism. That he was front running and cheating and stealing and doing whatever, but he didn't want it for himself. He was just making all this money in order to create a more just society. The billions and billions of dollars that he would make, he would be giving away to create equities and all of that. And that this is a classic villain play, right? Is to say, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm actually noble. I'm noble and wonderful. I am creating the new Jerusalem here, which, again, analogically reminded me of, I think it's George Orwell's first novel, Burmese Days, in which there is a sort of the villain in Burma is a guy named Upo Khin, who like does all kinds of terrible things, but in his head everything is going to be fine, because when he hits the age of 35 or 50, he's going to start building pagodas, and when he builds these pagodas, he will balance his karma, having done what he was doing aggressively to do whatever it was he needed to do to get his way. He would then sort of dedicate the rest of his life after he made his fortune to noble works of eleemosynary generosity and religious fervor that would bring his karma into balance, and then everything would be fine and the world would be better. And then the great irony is he dies before he can build his pagodas. So they are simultaneously building the pagodas and making the stuff that they have to build the pagodas for, and nobody trusts them anymore. Like, do we trust that any one of these people, who I think have done, a lot of them have done astoundingly good things for humanity? Musk, I think Bezos too. I think a lot of them have, right? Particularly in regards to space and all of that. Do we trust them? Do we trust them to be the leaders?
This is why I think like the mythology that we spoke about earlier is a good way to think about this, because we homeschool, and so I've thought about like basic curricula a lot and the things that make up a good curriculum and all that stuff. And I kept coming back to two things, which is, the history of Rome, the fall of the Roman Republic, and the Greek myths. Those two things to me kept coming back again and again as super valuable educational material. And I tried to think about why. One is basically true. One is history. One is not true, right? Prometheus is not, that's not actually how those powers came to Earth, etc. But their use, their function as like really easily understandable Aesop's fables has such an important use, right? Because instead of saying, here's what actually happened to create fire or whatever, you say, you put humans in this situation where people overreach, make bad decisions, and then the gods double back on them. I think people are worried about creating a kind of Mount Olympus here, a kind of god or a team of demigods that have a power over you now. It's not just that this is like an industrial revolution, which I think is the main concern because of jobs. That's the basic thing. But I also think there's these guys sound really powerful. Really powerful. And this was part of the concern with Mark Zuckerberg too. What does he have access to? If you're not paying for the product, you're the product, right? Isn't that what we always said? Because they're scooping up your information. And this just gets more and more. And I think there's a real worry about people creating a kind of human god structure in Silicon Valley who can, like, I don't know, turn off your computer, turn off your car, turn off your bank account, whatever it is.
They can turn off your car. Tesla can turn off your car.
And I think that
location.
Is less, but a not insignificant part of this is a kind of Greek feeling of being thrust into Greek mythology where, someone's who can't be trusted not to fly too close to the sun or whatever, just has these godlike powers that they cannot use responsibly because they are human or human enough that they don't have that kind of godlike judgment.
I agree entirely, and I'm not as sanguine about all this. I agree that the arguments are bad against this, against AI data center construction and all that. But I am of a more Luddite bent, but at the same time, really, it's a conundrum, or it's a paradox we're in here of sorts. Because Eliana is 100% right that it is, whatever you think about the technology and the people behind it, it is now a new arms race that we do have to win. So you have to sort of put aside, because I have deep and broad reservations about all this. But I have to put it all aside because better we do it than China, period.
So again, if we want to play analogy games, the analogy to nuclear energy here is very precise. Like, would we be better off theoretically in a world in which the atom had not been split? I suppose. I mean, I guess, like, if you could rewrite history, then you wouldn't have had the Cold War, and the Soviet Union wouldn't have been able to survive 50 years because it protected itself with a nuclear shield or something like that. But not splitting the atom would have meant that we would have been a poorer, less technologically advanced. That was the result of technological advancement. It wasn't the creation of technological advancement. And then we retarded a lot of the possible good use of nuclear energy, particularly here in the United States, like the creation of this clean, safe, non-polluting, vastly powerful energy source that, because we got scared of it, because we knew that it could blow up as a bomb, and there was like one near accident in 1979, we sort of gave up on nuclear energy. And we are possibly in the position here, as Abe said, but if the United States had said, as people did, as Robert Oppenheimer did, sort of the subject of the movie Oppenheimer, said, we've got to make sure that nobody uses this ever. So we need to create some new government, world government, to contain the human ability to destroy itself, because we'll never be able to do this. And that's when, in the movie, if you remember, Gary Oldman as Harry Truman says, get this crybaby out of my office. Like, we'll do what we need to do. Here, we also have this problem, which is it does feel like AI could destroy everything.
Right.
But it'll destroy everything worse if the Chinese control it. We'll be better stewards of it than they will.
Yeah, John, when you were talking, I just want to don't forget the race aspect of the bomb. I mean, it was
right.
First to beat Nazi Germany to it, and then the Soviets. So, yeah.
And but we always have the fights over, like, the term Sputnik moment has its resonance precisely for that reason. The idea that our adversary is going to make a leap, and it's going to, and we have to have a real gut check moment about how it is that we are not first in something that is in some kind of international competition.
We are living through this as we speak, day by day, in the practical application of military power in the 21st century, as we are seeing it in these two wars that are being conducted right now, right? Our war with Iran, Israel's war with Iran, and the war between Ukraine and Russia, in which 75 years of ideas about how to run and conduct warfare are being overthrown by things that are happening on the ground every day that are undercutting the entire architecture of how militaries are constructed, how defense is done, all of that. And we have to change it all on the fly while it's happening, while we protect ourselves. The only way we know how to protect ourselves is to use the old methods, because the new methods are untried, and we know that they're working offensively, but we don't know what the long-term consequences are. So we're going to have to do them both. And everybody is going crazy, because we are flying blind into the future. But that is what technological revolutions do. If you can take down a $3 million missile with a $2,500 doodad, then everything is different. The entire world is changed. Some country, Vanuatu could end up inventing something and become the world's most powerful country in 30 years if this is the way this all works. And if we shackle and handcuff ourselves, even if we want to, even if morally we're like, we're not ready for this. We're not ready to live in the world in which AI exists, the same way I think people felt we were not ready to live in a world in which mankind had finally developed the capacity to destroy all of humanity in one go, with a sort of global thermonuclear war. That had happened, and then we had to live with it. And now we have AI, which has the potential capacity to entirely alter the way people work, entirely alter the way people think, entirely alter the way people learn, entirely alter the way machinery interacts with us and all of that. And we're just not prepared. So this is going back to the original. You're Greg Abbott or you're Mike Rogers or you're somebody like that, and you are getting real vibrations from the people who are the one. This is one of these moments when they get to tell you how they're feeling about this. And I'm taking very seriously that these Republicans who would otherwise be, I think, techno-optimists, believers in economic growth and, how the good capitalist system creating wealth and all of that are going, I see, because they know that if they jump too hard on it, the blowback could be, I just don't like where you people are going, and that's fine. I'll go with the Hamas terrorist over you if you're gonna,
they're a stand in a weird way. They're a stand-in, right? It's the reversal of the political process because you can't vote for Sam Altman. You can vote for Greg Abbott or against Greg Abbott. You have this opportunity, and the democratic process is part of this, dude. You want a choice. You have a choice. When I was a local reporter covering like local education stuff, I remember in Jersey, at one point, so you could vote for the townspeople could vote for or against the school district budget, but they could not vote for or against the town council budget. The school district budget was the one that affected property taxes directly and whatever. So one year in New Jersey, in the county that I was covering, 50% of the school budgets were defeated at the polls. Half of the school districts saw their, and this is not in, this was like, it must have been Middlesex County, New Jersey. But, so not a fairly, first of all, highly educated. Second of all, not a poor county, this is central New Jersey. The budgets just went down in flames, and you talk to people and you ask them why, and they told you straight out, I can't vote on the town council budget. I can vote on this budget. You've given me two budgets. One of them I can vote on. So if I'm upset about anything in the town, I'm going to vote down the school district. Maybe it's not about property taxes. Maybe it's something I didn't like from the town council or the borough council. But you're giving me one budget to vote on, and so I'm going to bring all of my fears onto that. And that's what, and I think there's something very similar happening here, which is that I don't, I can't exactly vote Sam Altman in or out of office. I can't really vote for the pace exactly of this technological revolution, but you've given me a race to vote on, and I'm angry about something. And so that anger is going to be transmuted into the one avenue you've given me to vote on how I feel.
Again, playing history games, beginning of the 20th century, Teddy Roosevelt becomes president, right, as a result of the assassination of McKinley. And Teddy Roosevelt is a trust buster. He believes that there are malefactors of great wealth, that too much wealth is being concentrated in too many hands. J.P. Morgan has 2%, controls 2% of the GDP of the United States. J.P. Morgan, there's a bank run, or there's a huge economic crisis in 1907. J.P. Morgan effectively bails out the government of the United States. This act of actually, was a reasonable thing to do, obviously. The entire way that rich people behaved in the United States turned on a dime. They stopped building these grand mansions. They stopped living in these palaces in Newport and on Fifth Avenue and places like that. They moved to Connecticut and Westchester. They built houses behind giant 20-foot, 30-foot hedges so that nobody could see it. They hired publicists who said things like John D. Rockefeller gives his sons 10 cents allowance a week so that they should learn the value of hard work. They didn't buy fancy clothes. Their wives didn't go out to the opera in, regalia, all of that. There was this understanding that they were exposing themselves to a world in which, while you can't vote for or against, the head of First National Bank. You can vote for politicians who are going to make their lives miserable and who are going to do what they can to take them down and maybe go in a democratic socialist direction. And this is, I think, a time of choosing, therefore, for a lot of these people, Sam Altman, all these other guys, who either think naively that people really do love what they do and it's just a lot of Twitter nonsense and it's all, the peanut gallery, or they think they can manipulate it and control it. And I think they better be really careful because they're going to be expropriated. Their stuff is going to be taken away from them or something if this mood continues. And if Abe is describing himself as a Luddite, that's bad. Like that's an example of what happens in a world in which things start to get away from the people who are supposed to be containing and controlling them. It's like it's your dog. You have to put your dog on a leash. If you're Sam Altman, you say, well, I have this dog and it's now smarter than I am. And it not only can get out of its leash, but it can put me on a leash. And you're like, well, then you should probably go to jail.
I mean, that's the funny thing.
We need to shut all of your machines down.
Because I have this conversation with a lot of people, and I say, I don't like AI. I don't like what's going on with AI. I don't like no one's writing their own anything anymore. People are when you apply for a job, by the way, this is before the great job apocalypse that I'm not saying will happen. But when you apply for a job now, every big company is your applications are sorted via AI, and then job applicants they have to put their application first through AI on their end to make sure that the AI on the other end gives it a fair shot. Anyway, that was a sidetrack. But when
I heard about that this weekend from two different people.
Yeah, no. That's the kind of thing that people when I say they already feel this sort of post-human reality. But when I talk to people about my fears about AI, they always say, "Oh, but come on, don't you know it can do this? It can do that. It makes this so much easier. I now spend 10 seconds doing this when I used to have to put aside half an hour for it." And I always say, I'm not doubting that it can do all these things amazingly well, amazingly fast. I don't doubt that for a second. That's the problem. To me, that's the problem. Is that it's our reliance on it. Is the problem. For me, when we talk about why I describe myself as having more Luddite leanings.
Well, let's put it this way. So let's say AI delivers everything in theory that it could possibly deliver, meaning endless abundance from nothing, a kind of sort of created abundance of information, of knowledge, of convenience, and all of that, right? So where does that leave human ingenuity, human creation, striving, purpose, the idea that we have a purpose, the idea that life is about determining what your purpose is, and all of that? I mean, I sort of think about this in the most ridiculous fashion, which is the self-driving car issue. Because I think everybody is a little unnerved by the idea, which is probably inevitable, that our cars are basically going to become taxis, like driverless, and they're going to drive us around.
That's the one area where I'm pro AI.
Okay, I understand, but here's my point, and I know
I hate driving.
You hate driving, and I like driving, but it doesn't matter because there's already increasing evidence, although some of it comes from AI people, so who knows if it's true or not, that the number of accidents, if you're in a world of Waymos, the number of actual car accidents declines by 90%. This is the single largest killer of people in the United States. Automobile accidents are the single largest cause of premature death. If you could eliminate auto deaths, you would be moving into an entirely new realm of existence in which that was no longer a threat. But doesn't it scare the bejesus out of you to think that suddenly now you're not going to be driving your own car? Isn't driving your own car itself a kind of symbol of citizen autonomy that you experience? I know you don't like it, and a lot of people are nervous by it, but I'm just saying, isn't that, what are you losing when you don't drive your own car? Probably nothing moment by moment. You're not losing, you have more time to read or play Wordle or whatever, but you are losing you're losing agency.
You guys are losing me a little bit.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, certain times, sure, I want to drive, but there are plenty of times that I don't want to drive, and it's time lost doing other more productive things. And I have to say, I think that there's a stratification where there are a class of people, and unfortunately, it is the more educated class of people who are going to use AI to hyperpower the ingenuity that they have. Okay. I am already using it to do research, to double check doctors, to question doctors, I just can't believe how much experts get it wrong, and you can use it to come up with your own views outside of what you otherwise would have had to defer to experts. I'll just give an example because I think it's important. I got the audiology results for my son. I wouldn't otherwise have been able to understand these. It tells you he can hear from this hertz to that hertz, but I put them in AI and I said, explain these to me. What can he hear and what can he not? It explained to me what he can hear and what can he, at what levels. And so when the ENT told me, oh, you wait and see whether to take action on this, I thought to myself, I'm not actually sure if that makes sense in this case. And it led me to go get a second and a third opinion, but it allowed me to understand something I wouldn't have otherwise been able to understand and to get a second opinion. That's been repeated for me so many times, but what I do think the industry needs to do is explain to people who are less educated how it could empower them in these ways.
Look, that is obviously the most important point, which is why I brought up like the world in which there are no car accidents as a result of AI. Like that is life-changing. Your experience with this audiology thing is life-changing. If you get a cardiology exam, right? You go, I went to the cardiologist. I had one of these stress tests, right? What is it? What will it be like in 3 years? It's not like this now. You feed the cardiology test into a machine. It has the records of 100 million other cardiology tests. It will be able to match precisely whatever you are, whatever happened on your test, to some other test or 50,000 other tests that are exactly like yours that may have markers for something that no one else could ever have seen before because there was no way to aggregate data to create a data set of your heart condition that you don't even really have. You don't have what would you consider a major heart condition that you can hear through a stethoscope. But maybe there's a tiny flap that, laparoscopic surgery could like go in this 5 seconds and fix that buys you 10 more years of life.
But beyond that, it actually is going to decrease our reliance on experts, these people who have owned you. Like,
and I hear Eliana saying is increase individual knowledge.
Right. So
people rather than make it, we often worry that AI is going to vacuum information out of our brains, deposit it in this chip, and we're going to have to refer to that chip when we want information, but we can't retain anything. But Eliana is talking about the other side of it, which is that lots of us will be smarter if you know how to use it.
Hyperpower your knowledge. You tell it, find me the 3 best medical studies on this. Find me the 3 leading experts on, this, that, and the other. It gives you access to things you wouldn't otherwise have been able to find on your own. I don't know for, people without a college degree or without a high school degree, what the corollary is, but I'm certain they exist.
Yeah, well, the corollary could be exactly this. Why would it be any different from you
Right.
to somebody, who didn't graduate from high school, who thinks something's going on with my kid I don't really understand, and goes to urgent care and gets some report from urgent care, and some doctor at urgent care says something or other, and then you take the test and you provide yourself a second, third, and fourth opinion. You're not educated. You didn't go. You dropped out of school in 11th grade. Suddenly, you have the benefit of medical school education, maybe.
And here's the
in
thing.
some weird way.
Those people in urgent care, okay? And I just think medicine is the place where this is going to explode, and it's the case that the companies should be making to people, is that they're time limited. They're all in a rush. You, with your own child, you have all the time in the world, or your husband, or your parent, or your grandparent. You have hours and hours and hours to do, and that's what it's going to empower, for you to give the care you want to give to the people that you love.
I mean, it involves what Seth and Bethany are doing now, right? They're homeschooling because to them, the time that they can take to homeschool will provide their children. Who cares more about the education of your children than you do? Nobody. And so we outsource it. I do. I've outsourced it. You're not. I don't have time, or I haven't felt that I had time, or whatever. Wasn't inclined to do it. But if this is a thing for you, and then obviously this joke of people who attack homeschooling on the ground that the kid who is being educated by his parent is going to get a worse education than somebody who did a year at a Department of Education in a DEI program at the University of Pasquaxie in Buttman, and therefore gets to be a master teacher in Tuscaloosa. Like, that's ridiculous. And this is exactly the same thing. What matters is what matters most to you. If that does empower you, then AI is an unalloyed, great thing. And so the problem is that there's no way to boundary it. I mean, we don't know what the ways are. That's why I brought up how it took 50 years for the British to figure out for labor laws to be introduced on the planet Earth that had never existed before.
Well,
because
and this discussion,
people were going to use 6-year-old children to clean chimneys and die of black lung at the age of 9, which is what was happening in London in the 19th century. People had 5-year-olds sweeping out chimneys.
Just
and also what AI.
Just so no one thinks I'm crazy, I agree with everything Eliana has pointed out here, and I of course I would dream of not acknowledging that is all very much for the good. My point is that I do believe every breakthrough entails trade-offs, and I don't think we have any sense of the other side of the trade-off yet. How significant it is, in what way it manifests, although we have some inklings perhaps, and they're more worrying to me than pure boosterism is accounting for.
I totally agree with that, and I think it's going to be much harder to educate our kids.
I mean,
but also I think you have to sort of you have to grapple with the instinct too. Even if it's not rational, right? If you want these breakthroughs to come through, we talked about the selling point of this. You have to grapple with the instinctive recoiling that human nature presents at these situations. I mean, when Abe was talking about driving, I was thinking about how we have 2 cars, right? We have the family car that fits everybody, and that is a newer car. And we have my car, what we used to refer to as the train car, which a lot of commuters would refer to as a train car, a car that one person gets in and drives to the train, and then parks when I was commuting. So it's older, it's much more old fashioned and not high tech. The family car, you don't need to insert the keys in the ignition. I know this is not mind blowing to people. Lots of people have cars like that now, but when I get in that car, I don't like it. And when I drive my car, and instead of pushing buttons, or in the family car, you can turn the engine over by pushing a button, and having your foot on the brake, whatever, without having the key in the ignition, and then you can shift it into gear with a dial that it sort of clicks, but you don't even really just slide. When I get into my car, I like physically turning the engine over with the key.
Right.
It's silly, I know, but it's and I like physically shifting the car into, not that I drive a manual, but I'm just saying, like, there is an instinctive thing where it's like, I don't know how comfortable I am with driving being a computer game now, more than I can feel like in control. If I want the car to turn or do something, the old way, I could actually feel myself changing the motion of the car. And that's an instinctive thing that should not stop us from putting computers in cars. But we do have to sort of get past.
So that is the ultimate question here that all of this comes down to, which relates to human agency and free will, right? In other words, like, you're turning the engine with the key as opposed to pressing the button. It's more analogical because you're doing something physically you feel, and then you hear the engine go on, and then it's like, I made that happen. Whereas you push a button, it doesn't seem quite like the same thing. But in the end, that's actually, the agency is the same. You're starting a car, right? Okay. So we're talking about real agency. Like, that's the question here that I think is what is so unnerving to people, even if they don't know what it is. And then we now get back to the data centers, which is, are we empowering the creation of machinery that will make us somehow less than human, or that will advance things that are less than human and have things that are less than human start making decisions for us without the benefit of being human? Now, there are ways in which, as in the case of Eliana's audiology test, maybe we don't want the human element very much. How do we know that the audiologist that we're going to didn't have one too many last night, or had a really shitty phone call just before had that appointment and is distracted while something is going on? You assume that they're going to do their best, but they're human, so they're flawed. Remove that from something where you were talking about things that are either life or death, or that, like, for us mean 1,000 times more to us than they do to that person, and you are probably going to have a better experience, or you're going to have a more authoritative answer to a question that you're posing. So balancing all this out, you're going to need a data center. You're going to need these data centers to power these machines that will help this happen. And the question is, are we going to shackle ourselves out of a justifiable fear of what this is going to do to us as humans? But it's going to happen anyway, and it's a totalitarian government that does evil that is going to have the jump on us, which is sort of like, that is, again, historically, analogically, why were World War I and World War II such problems? Because Germany had a more advanced military machine, both in the in the first decade of the 20th century and in the 1930s, than the rest of Europe did. They were better at it. They were a more advanced military, and so they had reason to believe they could win these wars. Are we ready to say, because we think these places are ugly, that we want China to control the course of human knowledge in the 21st century? I mean, I'm not. I also think aesthetically, and then we can sort of go here, this is the other thing. They don't do the philosophical stuff. They don't do the explanations. They don't explain what's going on. They don't provide a philosophical construct for people to understand it. And the politicians who support it don't either. There's also the aesthetic. Like, why do they have to look like that? Make them beautiful. I'm not kidding. You drive past like an Amazon warehouse somewhere. Why does it have to look like that? It's a giant warehouse sitting on a highway. It is an eyesore. It is a blight, right? Amazon would do itself an immense amount of credit if it built it in, like Gothic architecture, or, some kind of, or made it look like Disney World or something. You know what I mean? The data centers are the same thing.
I'm picturing the Magic Kingdom, but just with an Amazon smile logo on it.
No, exactly. But I mean, like, the data centers should be additions to the landscape that don't harm the physical landscape, that are aesthetically pleasing to the eye, rather than purely utilitarian, built as quickly as possible so that they can win the arms race. Like, they better do something to say that we are enhancing your life, and the visual, the creation of visually attractive things is one of those things, and they clearly are not. They ain't doing that. That's for sure. Just these steel buildings, a lot of vents in them, are not helping anybody's support of this. Okay, we have gone very long here, and I'm very glad we did. I think this was a very original and interesting discussion, and I'm thankful that we spent the time at it, and that we had so many avenues to go down. So we will be back with more conventional political talk tomorrow, I'm sure. For Eliana, Seth, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.